Sam, the current political climate, be it in our country, be it around the world, it's make very difficult for the humanitarian organization. So can you please help us to understand how really humanitarian aid future look like?
So we are in a period where you have a resurgent nationalism, a greater populism, a greater tendency towards authoritarian leaders, and unfortunately a sense of tribalism, of one group wanting to win against another. Within this context, the world has agreed to certain international humanitarian norms, laws that actually dictate how we could help each other or individuals who are victims of a war or after an emergency. And this mandate associated with the UN allows humanitarian organizations like yours and others to help individuals who are caught between nation states or different warring sides, or who are victims of a large-scale national disaster. Our challenge is that governments aren't always friendly to this idea, that there's a population to be helped that they may not want to ignore or actually may want to oppress. And so there's a constant push for the ability of organizations that are centered, we are centered on the dignity of human beings, the ability of a human being to have some potential in their future, no matter what their background, no matter who they are, what their passport is or isn't, and that humanitarian intervention should be able to reach them to provide life-saving supplies, but also ideally some way for the future. In many ways, the world knows they need us. The UN system knows that it needs international humanitarian organizations. Governments, as much as they may have troubles with certain populations, know that they can't simply eliminate people, that they have to, in essence, support these humanitarian operations. Our challenge going forward is to constantly remind governments why we exist, why this is a human right to provide support, why all individuals deserve humanitarian interventions and engagement, and no matter what the politics involved, there is always a side of human decency where we will reach out to touch and help people, and that we cannot simply descend and return to a situation where we look at just national interests and lose our own humanity. Our challenge is to make that clear to all governments.
We all face very serious financial challenges. So financial platforms are closed, doors are closed to us. Every day, more difficulties, more challenges. So how do you see actually the financial challenges be addressed in the future, so that humanitarian organization, so that good people, generous people, kind people, people that would like to share, their aid goes and reaches people in Yemen or in Syria or in Africa or somewhere else in the world? How that can be addressed, you think?
So I think the first bit is people give to organizations they trust, to institutions they trust that have established programs, that have individuals working here in the US who are tied to those programs and so forth. And the good news is those organizations exist and are in place. So we know that there are programs that reach individuals, and we know that there are organizations registered as US nonprofits, established, working within legal norms and so forth, trying to help. Our challenge is a byproduct of anti-terror laws. An unintended byproduct of anti-terror laws has been a fear that resources may flow to the wrong people. And instead of going, let's make sure that resources get to people in a refugee camp and so forth and ensure that's happened, there's been a blanket approach and fear within the banking system of trying to control and limit the flow of resources. Now, this issue of debanking, this issue of slowing financial resources is not just harming humanitarian nonprofits, but many nation states, small countries, the UN system, and at times even the US government. So our challenge here is to find ways to ensure that while we do not want resources flowing to the wrong people and that there are logic behind anti-terror laws, but if those laws and rules go too far, they actually harm people. So one of the things we've been doing as InterAction is pushing back very strongly within the Department of Treasury, making it clear that these rules need to evolve in a way that allow viable, legitimate American institutions to provide resources to save lives in places like Yemen, Syria, or elsewhere. This will be a long-term battle. My sense is that because it is affecting not just nonprofits, but corporations and governments, the World Bank, the UN, and others, that there will be a very large and steady pushback saying that in a world where we put a terror frame, we also need to look at the frame of humanitarian assistance to individuals. That is a right that resources should flow from this country through trusted institutions, through a bank, into a program that saves lives. And that's a battle that we need to continue to engage in.
I'm going to be a little selfish, and I'm going to ask this time a little bit about a trip that you actually undertook.
Yeah.
You were in Istanbul in the World Economic Summit, right? And then you have honored us while you were visiting refugee camps in southeastern Turkey. You visit also Zakat Foundation University. So university run by a humanitarian organization that all professors, a unique project because all professors are refugees themselves, all the students refugees. So can you please tell us your impression of that university?
So the first is the reality of traveling to Gaziantep, which is only about 30 kilometers north of Kilis, which is the border of Syria. And you have within this Turkish city, the population has almost doubled with the number of refugees coming across from within Syria. You see individuals who are wounded, you see families living in the smallest possible spaces. And the challenge of any movement of refugees is that we know they all want to go home, but oftentimes they will be in a new place for years, for decades, longer term. And if we look at this simply through the lens, I will provide you food to survive, we forget that they need a livelihood, they need a future. And one of the key elements and backbones of any future for any people is an ability to have an education, an ability to see the next generation have more information. So our first impression with Zakat University was, my goodness, there's this enormous building. I didn't realize you were so big. That there is education in a whole slew of areas happening. That it is happening in Arabic. That is providing an education diversified across men and women in a wide range of areas. And what you're doing is providing hope for the leadership and of a society that was a middle-income society in Syria, that they could continue to tap and increase knowledge as individuals, even though they are refugees. Because a refugee ultimately is a person. They are victims of a war, but they want to be able to dream about their future. They want to be able to learn. They want to be able to create and to contribute. And providing a university education that close to the border of Syria is a tremendous way to do that. And I thank you for the work that the Zakat Foundation has done, because it is truly impressive.
Sam, thank you so much for your time, and we are really honored to be, a member of the InterAction, and we are also blessed to have a leader like you to guide us and move the humanitarian organization toward the future. Thank you so much for being.
Thank you for your kind words. Appreciate it.